classifies mining on public land as infrastructure projects. We'll take you live now to the floor of the U.S. Senate. Live coverage here on C-SPAN 2.
The Senate will come to order. The chaplain, Dr. Barry Black, will lead the Senate in prayer.
Let us pray. Almighty God, by whose providence our forebears brought forth this country, hallowed be your name. We thank you for a new day of service to you and our nation. Lord, forgive us when our lives contribute to the problems and not the solutions. Keep us from obstructing the doing of your will. Make us better that we may do better. Today, attune the will of our lawmakers to your purposes, providing for them the stamina that comes from above. Lord, give them the strength to be productive in service, to live above daily trifles, and to surrender to your will and love. We pray in your great name. Amen.
Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance to our flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. The clerk will read a communication to the Senate.
Washington, D.C., July 12, 2012, to the Senate. Under the provisions of Rule 1, Paragraph 3 of the Standing Rules of the Senate, I hereby appoint the Honorable Tom Udall, a senator from the state of New Mexico, to perform the duties of the chair. Signed, Daniel K. Inouye, President pro tempore.
Mr. President.
Majority Leader.
I now move to proceed to count number 446S3369, the Disclose Act.
The clerk will report.
Calendar number 442, S3364. Motion to proceed to calendar number 442, S3364, a bill to provide an incentive for businesses to bring back jobs to America.
Mr. President, I move to calendar number 446, S3369.
The clerk will report.
Motion to proceed to S3369, a bill to amend the Federal Election Campaign Act of 1971 to provide for additional disclosure requirements for corporations, labor organizations, super PACs, and other entities, and for other purposes.
Mr. President,
Majority Leader.
the next hour will be equally divided between the two leaders or the designees, with the majority controlling the first half and Republicans controlling the final half. Last evening, I filed cloture on the Land Use Substitute Amendment and to S2237, the Small Business Jobs and Tax Relief Act. Under the rule, cloture votes would be on Friday. I'm going to work with the Republican leader. We've already have a general agreement that we'll try to schedule votes sometime today. Mr. President, this week Republicans continue to make the case that millionaires and billionaires can't afford to pay even a penny more in taxes. Meanwhile, a new report shows average tax rates are at their lowest level in decades. The nonpartisan Congressional Budget Office reported this week that in 2009, rates fell to their lowest level in more than 3 decades, 30 years. Much of that decline is thanks to President Obama, who has consistently fought to lower taxes for middle-class families over the last 3.5 years. The average tax rate in this country fell to the lowest rate since 1979, 17.4%. Mr. President, of course, that's still higher than what Mitt Romney paid in the only year he's been willing to disclose his tax returns. And I'm confident the reason he hasn't disclosed his tax returns in the years that people want to know, remember, he's disclosed 1 year. His father, George Romney, set the precedent that people running for president would file their tax returns, let everybody look at them. But Mitt Romney can't do that because he's basically paid no taxes in the prior 12 years. So the average tax rate in this country is the lowest it's been since 1979, 17.4%. But I repeat, that's still much higher than what Mitt Romney pays. Most Americans don't have the benefit of Swiss bank accounts, tax shelters in the Cayman Islands, or Bermuda. And who knows what else, we can't see those tax returns. As our economy continues to recover, it's critical we keep tax rates low for the middle class. They're still struggling to pay the mortgage, send their kids to college, save for retirement. That's why President Obama and Democrats in Congress want to extend tax cuts for 98% of American families. But there's one group that's not struggling. Mitt Romney and the rest of the top 2% of Americans. Mr. President, my Republican friends can come out here and, they can talk, it's terrible, because what we're trying to do is raise taxes on small business. Mr. President, the President's presentation, legislation, raises taxes on 2% of wealthy people and about 2.5% of businesses. So this is no crush for small businesses. It seems to me that they can, the top 2%, can contribute a little bit more to get this country's deficit under control. Yet Republicans are prepared to block tax cuts for 98% of families unless Democrats agree to even more giveaways for the richest of the rich. As Republicans continue to argue the wealthiest 2% can't contribute even a little more, I urge them to talk to the 3/4 of Americans who disagree. I urge them to talk to the almost 60% of Republicans who believe the wealthiest Americans should shoulder their fair share of the responsibility for getting the deficit under control. Almost 60% of the Republicans agree with what the President's doing. That is, the top 2% should pay a little more. So I urge my Republicans to my Republican friends, to talk to a few of the more than 135 million taxpayers who are waiting to see whether Republicans will continue holding hostage their tax cuts.
Under the previous order, the leadership time is reserved.
Mr. President.
The Republican leader.
Mr. President, yesterday something truly remarkable happened right here in the Senate. First, Democrats blocked a vote that a president of their own party had called for just 2 days earlier. And last night, the majority leader moved to shut down a debate on taxes that hadn't even begun. Moved to shut down a debate on taxes that hadn't even begun. Earlier this week, President Obama issued an outrageous ultimatum to Congress. Raise taxes on about 1 million business owners, he said, and I promise not to raise taxes on anybody else. At a moment when the American people are reeling from the slowest recovery in modern times, when the percentage of those who could work are working is at a 3-decade low, and just 5 months away from the economic body blow that will result if tax rates spike as scheduled on January 1st, the President's solution is to take more money away from the very business folks we are counting on to create jobs that we need, presumably so he can spend it on solar companies and stimulus bills. This was the President's brilliant economic solution to the mess we're in. Now, naturally, Republicans oppose this. The way we see it, nobody should see an income tax hike right now. Not small businesses, not individuals, nobody. Nobody should get a tax hike right now. The problem isn't that Washington taxes too little, but that it spends too much. But rather than just talk about it, we thought we should actually take a vote on it. Actually vote on it. After all, the President himself boasted Monday that he'd sign a bill to raise taxes on small businesses right away, he said, if we'd pass it. So what we suggested was 2 votes. One on the President's plan, once it's actually written, and one on ours. But the majority leader in the Senate blocked it from happening. Why? Because, as usual, Democrats want to have it both ways. Now, 2 years ago, just 2 years ago, when the economy was growing faster than it is now, 40 Democrats in the Senate voted to do precisely what Republicans are proposing right now. Keep everybody's taxes right where they are and do no harm. Well, the President apparently doesn't want any of them to vote that way now. In other words, he doesn't want to do what's right for the economy and jobs. He wants to do what he thinks is good for his re-election campaign. For some reason, his advisors think it helps him to take more money away from small, already struggling businesses and spend it on more government. That's the plan anyway, and he wants to stick with it. So yesterday, the Democratic Majority Leader did what the President told him to. He made sure there wasn't a vote on a proposal that a President of his own party demanded 2 days earlier. Our friend the Majority Leader made sure there wasn't a vote on the plan the President was asking for just 2 days ago, and then offered a vote today on a bill that isn't even written. And only if Democrats and Republicans give up their ability to offer amendments to the bill we haven't seen yet. This is the kind of absurdity you get when you've got a governing party that's more concerned with winning an election than in facing up to the consequences of the president's failed economic policies. But it actually gets even more absurd, because the majority leader didn't just block us yesterday from having votes on whether to raise taxes or not. He wouldn't even let us have a debate about it. Don't have the vote and don't have the debate. Senators on both sides of the aisle have proposals that would help the American people weather the economic crisis we're in. Senator Hutchinson has an amendment that would extend the relief from the blow of the marriage penalty. Senator Heller has a plan to extend the deduction of sales tax in Nevada. Senator Scott Brown and a whole host of other Republicans have a proposal to repeal the potentially devastating tax on medical devices that's being used to help fund Obamacare. Senator Cornyn and Crapo have amendments that would lessen the blow of the tax hikes on investments, tax hikes that will directly affect job creation and harm those like our seniors who are living on fixed incomes. As for the Democrats, well, even they have some ideas that might do some good for the country. Senator Brown of Ohio has an amendment to extend the research and development credit, which I know has bipartisan support, even if Republicans might differ in his approach. Senator Begich has an amendment that would extend the popular tax breaks for investments by small businesses. I don't fully endorse the specific approach taken by these two, but if they had a chance to offer and debate, I think we might be able to work out an agreement and actually get a result. But we can't even have a debate or get a vote on these Democratic amendments because of the politics of this. Now, personally, I can't imagine why Democratic senators would tolerate this kind of authoritarian approach. It seems to me if Senator Brown of Ohio and Senator Begich really believe in their amendments, they'd fight for a vote on them. It's hard to believe their constituents sent them here to rubber stamp everything the party leader puts out there, regardless of the impact on their states. We'll probably have these votes later today. If these Democratic senators vote to cut off debate, I'll leave it up to them to explain to their constituents why they didn't think these amendments deserved votes. But the larger issue is this. All of these petty political maneuvers betray an astounding lack of concern about not only the economic crisis we're in, but the threat that's posed by the fiscal cliff we all know is looming in January. A New York Times article from just this morning suggests that one reason the economy has slowed down so much is that businesses are reacting to the uncertainty about what happens at the end of the year. Well, of course that's the case. We hear it from everyone. And yet here's a Democratic-controlled Senate blocking votes, blocking debate, and hosting private meetings with the President's political advisors on strategy instead of working on serious bipartisan solutions. Last night, Democratic leaders admitted that the bill they wanted Republicans to turn to hadn't even been written yet. Think about that. The proposal the President announced Monday with so much fanfare hasn't even been put on paper yet. And yet Democrats wanted us to move to it. Move to what? What is it? We haven't seen it. I think it hadn't been written. You can't move to a speech. This is the level of seriousness we're seeing from the Democratic-controlled Senate right now. This is how seriously they take this economic crisis. It's nothing but one political game after another. If the President has a proposal, we'll be happy to send an intern down to the White House to pick it up. But we can't vote on a speech. And frankly, we can't continue like this. It's long past time. Democrats at the White House and in the Senate took the lives and challenges of working Americans as seriously as they take their politics. It's time to put childish things aside and get down to serious business for the American people. I yield the floor.
Under the previous order, the following hour will be equally divided and controlled between the two leaders or their designees, with the majority controlling the first half and the Republicans controlling the final half. Senator from Colorado is recognized.
Mr. President, good morning. I rise today, as I have been every day, to urge my colleagues to work with me, to work with you, to extend the production tax credit for wind. The PTC, as it's known, has broad economic effects, positive effects all across our great country. And I'm going to talk today, as I have, about a state, an individual state I talk about every day, that is known for its wind resources, and that's the great state of Kansas. Kansas is already known as a national leader in both wind manufacturing and production. In fact, Kansas has the most wind projects under construction as we sit here today, and is on track to almost double their installed wind energy capacity. You can see from the map here of Kansas that there's a lot of activity. For example, there is construction currently underway in what will be the largest wind farm in Kansas, which is located just southwest of Wichita, which is in south-central Kansas. The Flat Ridge 2 wind farm will cover about 66,000 acres, and it should be up and running by the end of the year. The two companies running the project, BP Energy and Sempra U.S. Gas and Power, have invested over $800 million and employed 500 construction workers. Those are impressive numbers wherever you might find them. But that's not all, Mr. President, because once the project is done and operating, the local communities should receive over $1 million annually in tax payments from the project, and there's some 200 property owners who own the land under the turbines, and they will receive a similar amount in royalty payments. That's real money. That's for real Americans, all thanks to wind energy and the production tax credit. These are jobs and investments, Mr. President. They're created here at home, and they create good-paying jobs in Kansas. They help the local economy, and they provide critical income to rural communities. And I have to say this is especially important as the drought takes a steep toll on farmers across the Midwest this year. Wind power, if you think about it, Mr. President, it's a cash crop that always ripens and always returns on the investment in the marketplace. And this is just one project in Kansas that isn't even completed yet. So I want to talk about the overall effect of wind energy in Kansas. The wind energy industry in Kansas, it supports 3,000 jobs. It results in $3.7 million in property taxes from wind projects that go to local communities. And 8% of Kansas power comes from wind. Those are impressive numbers. They would only grow as Kansas invests. There are thousands of Kansas wind energy jobs supporting millions of dollars of local tax revenue, and as I pointed out here, over almost 1/10 of Kansas' total power needs. This harnessing of the wind has truly become an economic driver, and it presents enormous opportunity for this important Midwestern state. And I want to focus on one county, Mr. President. Lane County is headed up their economic development operation by Dan Hartman. He moved to western Kansas 5 years ago, in large part because he wanted to live in the heart of rural America. But he also wanted to help create a better, more secure energy future for America, with Kansas playing a central role. And since then, Dan has been working with counties, farmers, landowners to bring as much wind energy as possible to western Kansas. And those possibilities are, I think, almost unlimited, because there's enough potential wind power in Kansas to meet the needs of Kansas some 90 times over. Mr. President, that brings me to the point that I want to make today, and that's why I keep coming to the floor. The uncertainty that we've created, unfortunately, by failing to extend the wind production tax credit has sidelined roughly $3.5 billion in wind energy investments. And that just defies common sense. Back home in my state of Colorado, I keep hearing from my fellow Coloradans, why the heck aren't you in Congress working to save wind energy jobs right now? And to Dan Hartman, the solution seems simple, and I want to quote him. He said, "I look at the wind energy industry as a matter of survival and our future in Kansas. If we don't extend the PTC, we're throwing away our future. We need it badly. If you really look at the money, the PTC cost is dwarfed by the capital investment it encourages." Dan has put it right, and we should listen here in the Congress. Mr. President, if we refuse to develop our wind energy resources, there are a lot of countries that are willing to outcompete us. Take China, for example. We have to work to keep these jobs and that investment here in the United States, and that's why the Congress must extend the production tax credit as soon as possible. Mr. President, you also know we have bipartisan support. This isn't a Republican or a Democratic issue solely, and Senator Moran from Kansas, my good friend, has joined me and others to make this happen. We've offered an amendment to the bipartisan small business lending bill that would extend the PTC by 2 years until the end of 2014. So we need the PTC. It equals jobs. We need to pass it as soon as possible. And I want to ask my colleagues again, as I have every day, to join Senator Moran, join Senator Udall from New Mexico, join Senator Thune and others to help pass this much-needed common-sense bipartisan amendment, or find another way to extend the PTC to ensure that more investment and more jobs in states like Kansas, Colorado, and all across our country will be the result. So, Mr. President, I thank you. I yield the floor, and I note the absence of a quorum.
The clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Akaka.
Mr. President.
Senator from Rhode Island.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I rise today in support.
Senator is advised we're in a quorum call.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would ask unanimous consent that the quorum call be dispensed with.
Without objection.
Thank you, Mr. President. I rise today in support of the Small Business Tax Cut and Job Creation Act. This is a tough economy for a lot of people across the United States. It's especially difficult in my home state of Rhode Island. And that's why I support the legislation that is before us today. It will help small businesses to hire new workers, to expand their payrolls, or invest in new capital equipment. And this is a common-sense step to encourage growth and create jobs. These tax cuts are cost-effective and have been estimated by the CBO as having some of the biggest bang for the buck compared to other fiscal policies that directly benefit businesses. It's especially important to pass these cost-effective policies because we're in the midst of a global slowdown that is hurting job creation and lowering government revenue. Now, in contrast, particularly in the other body, the House, they have been intent upon repealing the Affordable Care Act, rolling back regulations on firms that pollute, or providing tax windfalls to special interests. That will not provide the real economic growth that we need today to put people to work. In fact, it will exacerbate our deficit and it will hurt the middle class of the United States. The targeted tax cuts in the legislation that we've proposed, the Small Business Jobs and Tax Relief Act, stand in stark contrast to the approach taken by the House Republicans in their Small Business Tax Cut Act, which is in many respects just another way to provide huge tax benefits to the wealthiest Americans, in contrast to doing what we should be doing, providing jobs for all Americans. Proposals like the House Republican bill would only generate 30 cents for every federal dollar spent as compared to the $1.30 and the $1.10 multiplier for tax cuts for job creation investments in new equipment, respectively, that are included in our version. Even more disturbing with the House proposal is that half of the $46 billion would go to the wealthiest Americans, millionaires, billionaires, without any obligation to create one single job. Our bill provides, in contrast, a targeted 10% income tax credit to businesses that increase their payroll by hiring new workers or raising wages this year. So there is a direct link between benefits for new jobs or higher wages for American working men and women. This is a tax credit that is directly linked to this job creation effort. And the credit is targeted to increasing middle-class jobs and wages because the credit only applies to the first $110,000 of wages for any individual employee. So we are looking to target this as closely and precisely as we can to be both effective and prudent with our resources. The tax is further targeted to small businesses because it only applies to the first $5 million in new payroll, especially effectively capping the maximum tax credit to any business to $500,000. The bill also extends bonus depreciation through 2012 for businesses that invest in new capital. Bonus depreciation has proved to be an effective incentive for businesses to pull forward capital purchases and invest in the near term, offsetting some of the weak aggregate demand that has held back our economic recovery. In 2011, bonus depreciation accelerated $150 billion in tax cuts to 2 million businesses and generated an estimated $50 billion in added investment. In total, the Small Business Jobs and Tax Relief Act is estimated to create about 1 million jobs and over 3,500 jobs in my state of Rhode Island. And we desperately need these jobs, and we need them as quickly as possible. This is a responsible, cost-effective, and fair way to generate growth. Before us today is yet another example, I believe, of my colleagues in the Democratic caucus putting forth reasonable solutions that have been analyzed by economists and determined to provide immediate help to millions of out-of-work Americans. But my fear is that my colleagues on the other side will again filibuster and oppose this effort, like others we've made, while only offering proposals that promise great things, but in reality contribute very little to putting people to work quickly. And that is our challenge. The damage caused by our refusal of many of my colleagues to support these legitimate job proposals and actively unwind federal support for our recovery is hard to overstate. The narrow focus in which a vast proportion of their tax cuts flow to millionaires and billionaires or corporations that send jobs overseas doesn't help our middle class, doesn't help our economy, doesn't help our nation's fiscal health. And we have to respond to that immediate crisis. And the legislation before us does respond to that crisis. Jobs for middle-income working Americans right now, not large additional tax cuts for the wealthiest of Americans. So I hope that we can move forward. I hope that we can bridge the differences and pass this legislation. It is legislation that has been looked at by economists and has been determined to provide real benefits. For every dollar invested, we'll get more than that in terms of economic productivity in the economy. And as a result, I hope we can move forward on this. And again, it is in stark contrast to simply proposing to cut taxes for the wealthiest Americans and assume that that will put people to work. That was the essence of the Bush administration for 8 years. And at the end of those 8 years, we were in the deepest economic crisis with losing hundreds of thousands of jobs a month. We've pulled back from that brink. But in order to go forward with momentum and confidence, we have to pass legislation such as the legislation we've proposed today. Targeted efforts to put people to work in the private sector, to move our economy forward, to move the nation forward, to increase the confidence of our people that we are dealing with the problem that most affects them in the most meaningful way, and that is simply to put them back to work. And when we do, this country will do great things as it always has done. And with that, Mr. President, I would yield the floor and note the absence of quorum.
Clerk will call roll.
Mr. Akaka.
Mr. President. Senator from Nevada. I'd ask that the quorum call be dispensed with.
Without objection.
Thank you, Mr. President. Last week's jobs report reinforces what many of us have known for some time. Unlike what the President would like you to believe, the private sector is not doing fine, and the administration's policies are not providing effective solutions to our nation's problems. The health of our economy hinges upon job growth, and it clearly has not received the attention it deserves. Our nation has no roadmap, and it is past time for a genuine effort to work in a bipartisan manner to create the certainty and stability that will allow American businesses and families to thrive. Every morning, Nevadans wake up, grab their hometown newspaper, turn on their local news. Some are getting ready for work, others start another day to try to find a job. These Nevadans have become all too familiar with the headlines of Nevada leading the country in unemployment and foreclosures. For the Nevadan who is going to their job, these headlines create fear and uncertainty about their future. For the Nevadan who's unemployed, these headlines are another blow to their hope to finding work. And that is what many Nevadans have come to live with for far too long. I read and see the latest unemployment statistics just like everyone else. But I know that behind these numbers are real people struggling to make ends meet. Being home in Nevada, I've met the unemployed mechanic. I've met the unemployed computer engineer. And I've met the unemployed waitress. Blue-collar and white-collar workers alike continue to pay the price of the poor decisions by Wall Street and Washington, D.C. Nevadans did not want Wall Street, did not want the Wall Street bailout, and Washington did it anyway. Nevadans did not want the trillion-dollar stimulus bill, and Washington did it anyway. Nevadans did not want the President's health care bill, and Washington did it anyway. When I'm in places like Reno, Las Vegas, Henderson, or Elko, I often ask people to raise their hands if the bailout has helped them find a job. No one raises their hand. So I ask, did the stimulus help you find a job? And no one raises their hand. Finally, I asked them if the health care bill helped them find a job, and still no one raises their hand. In January of 2009, President Obama was inaugurated. Democrats controlled both the House and the Senate. Nevada's unemployment was at 9.4%. Nearly 4 years later, Nevada's unemployment is 11.6%. Too many people in Nevada are unemployed, have stopped looking for jobs, or worse, left the state for employment elsewhere. With over 23 million Americans out of work or underemployed, I think it's past time to ask the President and this Congress, is this working? Nevadans have seen the effects of higher Washington spending, higher regulations, and higher debt, and they know that these policies have failed. They deserve solutions. Instead of having more show votes, Congress needs to focus on pro-growth policies that eliminate burdensome regulations, reform the tax code, and help struggling homeowners. It is my hope that our economy will improve as the year goes on, but Washington must take action. There are small common sense measures that can pass right now if given the opportunity. I continually come here to the Senate floor to offer solutions that will provide our nation's job creators with the tools to provide for long-term economic growth. I have crafted 3 housing bills to help those foreclosed upon to stay in their home, shorten the short sale process, and ensure homeowners who get mortgage relief are not hit with additional taxes. I have legislation that would require Washington bureaucrats at agencies to take into account jobs when issuing regulations or to streamline permitting for energy-related projects on public lands, or even something as simple as combining annual reports submitted to Congress. These are small measures that, if passed, would make a big difference in the nation's job creators. Unfortunately, is too often we find ourselves taking political showboats instead of debating common sense solutions. The bill we have before us on the floor is a perfect example. I filed 2 amendments to this bill that would help ease the stress of taxes on middle-class Nevadans and one that would help underwater homeowners. Both are bipartisan proposals, yet once again we find ourselves in a position that we cannot have an open debate on amendments. These are not partisan issues. These are American issues. If any member of Congress commits themselves to spending reform, tax reform, regulation reform, and finding solutions to fix the housing problems, then they will have me as an ally. Nevadans deserve better than what they've gotten from Congress and this White House, which is why I will continue and keep coming to this floor to raise my voice for the citizens of Nevada, and I will fight every day to create jobs and get Nevadans back to work. Thank you, Mr. President. I suggest the absence of quorum.
Clerk will call the roll.
Mr. President.
Senator for Kansas.
Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent that the quorum call be vitiated.
Without objection.
Mr. President, I would like to be recognized for 15 minutes.
Without objection.
Mr. President, I come to the floor today to congratulate the University of Kansas on its very prestigious designation as a National Cancer Institute Comprehensive Cancer Center. I do regret I cannot be at the KU ceremony today to mark this designation by the National Cancer Institute because of anticipated votes in the Senate, but I am certainly there in spirit. This designation of Comprehensive Cancer Center is such an important development for my state and others in the region because it means that many Kansans and their families who have faced frightening diagnoses, trying treatments, will no longer have to seek cures all the way down to Texas or up to Minnesota. They can and they will be able to stay closer to home and their support systems. Simply put, it's great news for Kansas cancer patients and those patients in the entire region. I am personally gratified by this designation because it represents more than a decade of work with so many outstanding partners. It has truly been a team effort to achieve this important federal designation. When I was first elected in this body back in 1996, I created a blue ribbon committee of Kansas leaders in government, academia, and the private sector, over 100, to advise me on the state's science and technology needs. The goal was to make us more competitive in a global marketplace, increasingly reliant on research and technology, and to provide economic opportunity to stop the outmigration of our best and our brightest young people. The Roberts Advisory Committee set out to implement policies and secure federal investments to further the research goals of Kansas State University in plant and animal science, Wichita State University in composite and aviation research, and the University of Kansas in life science research. I personally took this goal to the Kansas legislature back in 2001 and again in 2002, encouraging my colleagues in the state legislature to help promote state investment in research infrastructure, to be a partner. At the time, I spoke about how all of the statistics showed that Kansas was lagging behind other states in the race for federal and private research dollars. And in response, the Kansas legislature more than stepped up to the plate. Special thanks to the A-team at that time, leaders like Representative Kenny Welk, Senator Kent Glasscock, Representative Nick Jordan, and Senator Dave Kerr. The legislature voted in favor of bonding authority, and we constructed and invested buildings at the KU Cancer Center and the Biosecurity Research Institute at K-State. Likewise, Wichita State University's work in composite research is now actually revolutionizing industries from aircraft clear down to healthcare. And about this same time, Stowers Biomedical Research Institute came into existence, which provided a key private source of research excellence. Our Kansas motto is "To the stars through difficulty." Well, in short, the stars aligned. KU's then Chancellor, Bob Hemenway, and I sought out other opportunities to help raise KU's research profile. In 2004, we invited then NIH Director Elias Zerhouni to KU for a tour and a discussion about KU's medical center's research facilities. He recognized, as many federal research directors do, there is great promise in research conducted at Kansas universities. Chancellor Hemenway and I worked in concert to design congressionally directed programs to supplement KU's internal National Institute of Health Cancer Research successes. This included those won by Dr. Jeff Albee, who leads one of 4 NIH drug discovery centers. Furthermore, this coordinated effort with Chancellor Hemenway and his leadership team also provided KU with the flexibility to recruit new cancer research faculty who brought considerable expertise in NCI cancer research programs to the university. In 2006, with the critical mission of the National Cancer Institute in mind, from my post on the Senate Health Committee, we fought to reauthorize funding for National Institutes of Health, which oversee the National Cancer Institute. Now, this reform bill reaffirmed the various centers of the National Institute of Health, including the Cancer Institutes, and reauthorized their funding. In fact, this was a continuation, Mr. President, of congressional efforts from 1999, when we were successful at doubling NIH funding over 5 years at a time when many wanted to divert federal funds to other research. My then partner in the Senate, Senator Sam Brownback, and now our state's governor, and I worked together to advance this push, this effort. In 2009, Senator Brownback and I secured $5.5 million in federal investments for the University of Kansas to purchase equipment needed to further its cancer research. Sam's leadership, both then and now, is immeasurable. Over those 10 years, there were many other excellent team members supporting this effort who should be recognized. I apologize, I will not be able to name everyone who played such a big and important role. But first, Dr. Howard Mosper, Dean Emeritus of the KU School of Pharmacy. He was the force behind the regular meetings of our Science and Technology Advisory Committee. Howard, who lives in Lawrence, home of KU, did this work for free, because he recognized the opportunity to use the Advisory Committee to provide us with key facts to support our research and technology initiatives. KU, in fact, hosted many of our Advisory Committee meetings down through the years. I truly appreciate that. Riding shotgun back in Kansas on this effort has been my tireless staff member, Harold Stones. Harold provided the hard work of collecting and then distilling and then providing to everybody concerned the valuable contributions among our technology leaders for more than a decade, helping me turn them into policy and progress. Credit must also go to former KU research directors Dr. Bob Barnhill, Dr. Michael Welch. They were instrumental in my early education about the KU Cancer Center. Jim Roberts, who sadly passed away from cancer himself, was a valuable KU advisor to me, as is Steve Warren as of today. I have appreciated getting to know Dr. Roy Jensen, who leads the KU Cancer Center. I know Roy will continue to stay close in touch with me and the entire Kansas delegation within the KU Cancer Center as it does continue to progress. Our work is ongoing. It is not done. I'd also be remiss not to mention the contributions of my former legislative director, Mr. Keith Yaley. Keith was the point person for KU to contact, whether it was about the KU Cancer Center, the Advancement in Special Education, or the Hoagland Brain Imaging Center, where we also secured $1.8 million in federal investment for renovation and equipment. Well, Keith went on to work for KU, for Chancellor Hemenway, and helped him and our current chancellor Gray Little, to navigate the corridors of Capitol Hill. My former Chief of Staff, Leroy Towns, former Deputy Legislative Director, Jennifer Swenson, and my current Senior Health Care Policy Advisor, Jennifer Boyer, round out the list of the Roberts team who have spent countless hours working on behalf of the University of Kansas, whether it's the Cancer Center designation or any other of KU's initiatives. Let me emphasize that my current colleagues, let me stress that my current colleagues in Congress, Senator Jerry Moran, Congresswoman Lynn Jenkins, and Congressman Kevin Yoder, have each carved out important initiatives to promote this designation and have helped make this day possible. This partnership will continue for KU. Mr. President, you cannot accomplish something this encompassing without strong public support. In this regard, I also want to thank the publisher and the editor of the Lawrence Journal-World, Mr. Dolph Simons, Jr., for his comprehensive coverage with regard to all of these initiatives over the years. What we have today with the NCI designation is proof of what I said to Kansas and the Kansas State Legislature back in 2001, that public and private and academic partnerships are critical to developing our state's economy over the long term. I applaud the generosity of the Kansas Masonic Foundation, Annette Block, and the Hall Family Foundation and others for their key contributions to this effort. Mr. President, in the Senate this week, we've talked a lot about the need for job growth. Jobs, jobs, jobs. According to the University of Kansas, since 2006, the National Cancer Institute's designation Pursuit alone has created 1,123 jobs and had a regional economic impact of $453 million. We can only expect with the announcement of the Cancer Center designation today that these numbers will grow. Jobs, jobs, jobs. Our work does not end today. We'll always be focused on ensuring a better treatment of cancer victims. A great thanks go to so many, past and present. I am honored to have been there at the beginning. But in some ways, I believe you ain't seen nothing yet. So congratulations to the University of Kansas and to the entire state of Kansas. Rock chalk, Jayhawk, well done, KU. Thank you, Mr. President.
From Massachusetts.
Thank you, Mr. President. I rise today to discuss the small business tax bill currently before the Senate.